Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Donna, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Karen so much for this opportunity for asking me to speak. Boy, it's been a long time since I've talked for 45 minutes, so I don't know what you're going to get tonight because I was trained never to plan what you're going to say. That's your ego. Just ask God for, well, what I usually say is, please, God, fill my heart with love and my mouth with words. So let's see what happens from here on in. Um, if you've heard this, just tell me and I'll quit and I'll go on to something else. But I always like to start with just a little something different. But um, there was this drunk who was driving around a parking lot. He had an appointment and he was late for the appointment. He couldn't find a parking space and he drove around. He's driven around like twice. He can't find anything. He's driving and he's driving and he's waiting and waiting for somebody to back out. Nothing happens. And finally he gets so upset. He says, God, if you find me a parking space, I swear I'll quit smoking, drinking, and carousing around. And just then, person right in front of him backs right out of the spot. And he goes, never mind, I found one. So that's the kind of alcoholic I am, or was anyway. I always tried to handle everything on my own. But my sobriety date is September 9th, 1989. I'll save you the math. That's 35 years. And I can't believe it. I cannot believe I have been in AA for 35 years. They are the best years of my life. I used to hear people say I have a life second to none, and I never understood what that meant. But boy, I've got it now. Um, you know, I um, I swear I was born an alcoholic. My father was not an alcoholic, but he was an adult child of an alcoholic. And my older brother used to tell this story all the time about how when I was 3 years old, my dad was reading the newspaper and he was having a glass of beer. And I asked if I could have a sip, and he said yes. Well, I proceeded to drink the whole glass and got pretty drunk on it, I guess. My brother said I would run back and forth in the kitchen. I was banging my head against the refrigerator. And all that means to me, I mean, at the time when he told me all of that, I used to think it was pretty funny. But once I got to be an alcoholic and get into AA, I realized all it meant to me was that I was born an alcoholic. I had the affinity for it even when I was 3 years old. So I really never drank again until I was legally of age to drink, because my father was the kind of man who ruled the house with an iron hand and did what he said and wore your hair the way he wanted it and all that. But I was always the kind of drinker who never knew when to stop. Um, Always drank too much. If I was drinking at a friend's house, I'd have to be walked around the backyard until I get sober, or they'd make me sleep over. I always drank too much, and I always got drunk. And besides thinking that I was born an alcoholic, I was born afraid as well. I never felt like I belonged anywhere, not in my house, not in school, not anywhere. I just had that feeling of that anxious apartness that it talks about in the big book. And when I started drinking, it was the magic elixir because it dissolved the fear. And I thought, holy crap, I have finally found the thing that's going to save my life. Little did I know it was going to take it. But, I started drinking, and I was a daily drinker. I drank all the time, every day. I didn't see any reason not to, because this was the magic elixir. Of course, I wanted more of it. Um, there was a man that used to come to the meetings in New Hampshire when I first moved there, and he always used to introduce himself and say, I want more before I have any. And I understood that, and I understand it to this day. I'm the same way with ice cream. I have to be careful with that too. But, um, the drinking was fun for the first 10, maybe 12 years, really more like 10. And then it started to turn on me. All that anxiety that I thought it had gotten rid of came back with a vengeance. And I suffered from panic attacks where I could go to work, because I worked on the same street I lived on, about a mile and a quarter down the road. And on my way out of work, I would go to the liquor store and I grab my bottle of vodka. And as long as I had that bottle in the car, I'd be okay. But if I went to the grocery store first and started shopping, I would start to get panicky. Like I just had this sense of impending doom. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I would have to run out of the store, and then I'd go get my bottle. And as long as I had the bottle, I knew I was on my way home, or I could drink as much as I wanted to. I used to drink at the bar of a restaurant, but mostly what I would do is I would go out and I'd have 2 or 3 drinks, have a good time, and then go home and finish the job. I was one of those people that didn't want anybody else to see how much I drank, because it had gotten to the point where, well, at the end, I was drinking this much shy of a liter of vodka a day, and I didn't count if I had beer, wine, or brandy, and I always had beer, wine, or brandy besides the vodka. And I always left that little bit so that in the morning when I get up, I could have something. Because at the end, I had to keep a basin under the bed because I always woke up with the dry heaves. Because at the end of my drinking, I couldn't even keep food down. I had a really hard time with all of that. The drunkalogs are one thing. I really like to get more into the rest of it, but I will tell you that, surprise, surprise, I married an alcoholic, and he turned out to be an abusive alcoholic. We had one child, and when he was 3, I asked my husband to leave because I wasn't going to take the beatings anymore. I'd had enough. And I didn't realize he would say to me, "I didn't do that to you. You must have done it to yourself," which just to me sounded crazy. But what I realized once I got into AA was he was doing those things in a blackout and he didn't remember it. I always thought a blackout meant that you passed out and you didn't remember anything that you did. I didn't realize it was alcoholic amnesia, that you're still functioning, but you can't create memory because you get so much alcohol in your brain. It's absolutely impossible to make those connections. I found out a lot after I got into AA myself, but so, he and I got along fine once we were divorced. I didn't have a problem because I didn't have to deal with him when he was drinking, and pretty much raised our son alone. He was 3 years old when we separated. And, the thing was, I always drank when I was married to him. But once we got divorced, my drinking took off because he had lost his license numerous times, but he never had a license when we were married. So I used to drive him to work, our son to childcare, and then go to my job. And they were all in 3 different towns. At the end of the day, I'd go pick whoever was getting out first, our son or my husband, and then get everybody back home, cook dinner, do the regular, all the other stuff, and then get up in the morning and do it all over again. But once he left, I didn't have to control my drinking because I didn't have to be the driver for him or for everybody else all the time. And my drinking really got bad because there was nobody there to say, "How much are you having?" I tell this story because it was really important in my sobriety. I had my father's father. I told you my father wasn't an alcoholic, but my father's father died of alcoholism, and his youngest sister died of it as well. And I remember being a kid and watching my baby brother. We were at one of my father's sister's house for some holiday or something, and one of his sisters wasn't there, my Aunt Alice. And I remember my Aunt Alice a little bit. She used to come to visit. She's a very shy, sweet lady. But every time she'd go into the bathroom, she'd take her purse with her. And when she'd come back out, she'd be a little bit happier than she was when she went in the first time. So I didn't find out until that day when she wasn't there. All the women were in the kitchen and they were talking about poor Alice. Poor Alice. She had become a really bad alcoholic, and she was really swollen. Her liver was so enlarged that she really couldn't even sit up. She was really sick, and they put her in the hospital. And back then, they didn't know what to do with drunks. They had her on a slant board because she literally couldn't bend in the middle. But it was close to Christmas time, and she begged the doctors to let her go home for Christmas. And he said to her, Alice, if you drink, it will kill you. And she said, I promise I won't. My son is 8. I just want to spend Christmas with them. I'll come back afterwards and you can, do what you need to do to help me get well. So we let her go home. They sent her home in an ambulance, and she got home. And what she did was she called the taxi, and she had the taxi driver go get her a bottle of whiskey, and she drank it. And and she tried to sit up on her own. And when we are really bad alcoholics, we affect our bodies from the tops of our heads to the bottoms of our feet. And our blood gets thin, our bones get brittle, we're not eating. I mean, we're really in bad health. And when my aunt tried to sit up, 2 of her ribs snapped and one of them punctured her heart. And that's how she died. And she was 41 years old. And when it came my time and I started getting pains, over here on the right side, I knew where my liver was. And I was having not just unable to eat and keep food down, my blood was getting thin. I was bleeding from everywhere. And I didn't know what to do. I had a sneaking suspicion I knew what it was, but I really didn't want to have to go to the doctor and tell him about it because I didn't want to admit that I was an alcoholic. But anyway, turns out I had to have some minor surgery. But back then, in those days, when you had surgery, they didn't have the medications they have now for anesthetics, and they knocked you out. I mean, you had general surgery. So I couldn't pass the blood work, and he called me in and he said, what's going on with you? Your liver function's off the wall. Do you drink alcohol? And I said, well, yeah, I do. So, well, how much do you drink? I said, oh, a couple. I don't know an alcoholic that ever admitted to anything else. My ex-husband always said, I just had 1 beer. So I lied to the poor man. The disservice we do to doctors and psychologists and people who try to help us is just amazing. We handcuff them when they're trying to help us by lying to them all the time. And anyway, he told me to not drink for 30 days, come back and have the blood work again. And I don't know how I did it, but I white knuckled it for 30 days. And I went back, I had the surgery, and I thought everything was fine. In 2 weeks, I was back drinking as much as I drank before. Well, as God would have it, 11 months later, I had to have the same surgery done again. And same thing happened. He called me in his office and he said, what's going on with you? I told you not to drink anymore. And I said, well, I didn't think you meant forever. And he said, look, he said, your liver function is really bad. He said, if you continue to drink the way you're drinking, and I don't care what you tell me you're doing, I know you're doing more than what you're telling me. He said, there's nothing I have in my little black bag that can cure you. He said, the only thing I know of that might work is Alcoholics Anonymous. And their cure rate is 1 out of 30, he said. And my heart sank. My heart sank. Because my husband had tried AA. He got sentenced to AA numerous times for drinking and driving. And it never worked for him. Never worked for him because he never went to the meetings. He was smart enough to take the courts cards that he was given and go to the bar room, and he had a meeting list book, and so he would write down the name of the meeting and the time, and have one of his barroom friends initial sign first name and their last initial, and he got away with it. But I got really scared because I had a young teenage son at home, and at the time, and I had really lost just about everything. I was working 2 jobs, 7 days a week, 3 nights, trying to keep a roof over our head. But I was living in my mother's basement with my son at the time. And so I called a friend of mine who drank like I did, and I told her what the doctor said. She said, well, I've been trying to go to AA every now and then. She said, I'll take you to a meeting. So she brought me to a meeting at a hospital down in Lynn, Mass. And I don't remember a darn thing anybody said. I was embarrassed. They went around the room. Everybody identified themselves. And a woman said, her name and that she was a grateful alcoholic. And I thought, wow, she really loves to drink. She's grateful she became an alcoholic. I didn't get it. I didn't get it. But I did say I was an alcoholic. And I heard them say something about, you got to keep going to these meetings. So my friend took me to a meeting in my town in Andover, Massachusetts. And we started to walk in the room, and it was a small room, and the chairs were set up in a semicircle as you walked in the door. And there was a blackboard on a stand, and someone had written, "Let go and let God." And I thought, oh boy, I'm in the wrong place because I've got no religious training. I don't believe in religion. I'm not sure I even believe in God. And I start to walk out, and all the people coming in behind me went, nope, and just pushed. And I went in. And I'm so glad I did, because that was the place I met my first sponsor. Her name is Kay Robinson. I'm telling you that because she died when I was 16 years sober. That woman saved my life. Saved my life. I think I was 5 years sober before she admitted to me that I was her first sponsee. But she was the perfect person for me. Everybody thought she was soft. People would say to me, oh, Kay's not going to keep you sober. She's too easy. Well, she may have been easy with other people, but she wasn't with me. She had an iron fist and a velvet glove. She had a great way of explaining things to me, and she had this facility of being able to take a big, huge chunk of information, boil it down to, what it really needs to be about, and would feed it to me, spoon feed it to me. And she also knew that if anybody pushed me too hard, I would be out the door. And so when people would come up to me when I had 3 months of sobriety and say, oh, you've got 3 months, now you can chair a meeting, she'd say, leave her alone. She'll speak when she's ready. Leave her alone. And I loved that woman for that. You have no idea how much that meant to me, because I was so afraid to speak, so afraid to speak. I didn't have the benefit of going to a detox and learning what AA was and finding out about the steps in the program. I detoxed myself, damn near killed myself. I had seizures. I had bruises all over me. It was not fun, but I made it through. And this woman would say to me, after she met me at that first meeting, she said to me, gee, there's a good women's meeting tomorrow night in North Andover. It starts at 7:30. Why don't you meet me in the parking lot at 7:15? Do you have a car, right? And I said, yes, I do. She said, good, you meet me there. She wasn't going to pick me up and drive me. There was none of that. There's no hand holding other than meet me there and be there early. Always be there 15 minutes early, and we'll chat and I can introduce you to some people. To this day, I still get to meetings at least 15 minutes early. And out here in Fallbrook, yeah, here is so incredible. We all show up a half an hour early. It's great. But, she would take me around the room and she would introduce me to women, and she would say, get her number, get her number, don't get her number, get her number. And, I said to her, why am I getting all these women's phone numbers? She said, because you're going to call me every day. And if you can't reach me, because we didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't even have answering machines back then. So she would say, if you can't reach me, you call my sponsor, you call Sally. And if you can't get a hold of Sally, then you call one of those women. You keep calling until you find somebody to talk to. And I said to her, well, what if I don't get anyone? She said, well, then, okay, you take your big book and you just let it fall open and start reading on either one of those 2 pages and you'll find an answer. And she was right. That worked. It always, always worked for me. But, I think when I was 3 months sober, they said, we need a volunteer for coffee maker. Now, I don't drink coffee. I never drank coffee before. And she just stuck her elbow in my side and said to me, raise your hand. And I said, but I don't know how to make coffee. She said, raise your hand. So I raised my hand and I became a coffee maker, and I made the worst dishwater coffee for the longest time, but nobody ever complained. Nobody said a thing other than thank you so much for getting here early and for making coffee. And that's how I found out about these people, the graciousness, the kindness of the people in AA who wanted me to be there, who knew that I just needed a way in. to feel comfortable so that I could actually start, working on my steps and everything, which she had me start doing. That meeting she wanted me to go to, that first meeting, she said, meet me there. It was a step and tradition meeting. And she said, you always go to step and tradition meetings. And I said, why do I need to know the tradition? She said, because without the traditions, you won't know how to vote at a business meeting, and you will be going to business meetings. So, she just had this wonderful way about her. And I used to hear them say, when you're looking for a sponsor, if you're trying to find a sponsor, go to a lot of meetings, listen to everybody speak, women with women, men with men. And when you hear someone who has what you want, ask them to be your sponsor, because they know how to get it. They can teach you how to get it. And this woman laughed all the time. Oh my gosh, she was always laughing. She enjoyed life so much. And she and her husband had this wonderful, wonderful, loving relationship. You could see the electricity between them when they were together, And I just loved that. I loved it. And so she agreed to be my sponsor. And, everything was going along swimmingly till, I don't know, I was about 2 months sober. And she used to take a commitment to the Waltham detox once a month. And she said to me, you're going to come with me. You're not ready to speak yet, but you need to come and find out how we do this. So I went with her to, we were driving to Waltham. It was about I don't know, half hour's drive or something like that. And we're in the car and we're driving, and it was a cloudy day. And all of a sudden, I got this sensation, this sense of impending doom. And in my brain, I thought, I can't do this. I can't do this. There's no way I can keep sober. I cannot do this. I've never been a Girl Scout or a Brownie. I've never been on the debating team. I've never finished anything I ever started. Every time I would try to knit something, if I made a mistake, I'd throw it against the wall and just leave it there. And I became despondent in that instant. And I was looking out the car window, and all of a sudden, these rays of sun, there's a name for it, but I can never remember it. The rays of sun came through the clouds, and I saw them coming through, and all of a sudden, this voice that was so loud, it was outside of me and it was inside of me. And it said, it's going to be okay. That's all it said. And I knew it. I knew it. I believed it. I believed it was a power greater than me. And I told her about it eventually. I was afraid to tell her because I thought she was going to say, well, you're crazy. You're hearing voices. But she told me that was my spiritual experience. And it was. And, it was okay then. It's okay now. And I believe it'll be okay in the future. But I went with her, we went to all these commitments and everything. And I was 7 months sober when I actually chaired that women's meeting, that first one she had me go to. And I talked about my divorce and I started crying. And when I was done, she said to me, have you ever cried about your divorce before? And I said, no. And she said, that's because you were drunk when it happened and you didn't know how to grieve it. And you're finally going to be able to grieve it and let go of it. And she told me that we always have to grieve when we lose anything. It doesn't have to be a death. It doesn't have to be a divorce. Whenever anything we lose or something happens to us where something is leaving our life, we need to grieve it. We grieve it first, but then we find the good in it. That's your job, she said to me. Your job is to find the good in every bad thing that happens to you, because God doesn't give you anything that isn't going to be a lesson or a reason for you to stay sober. So, I was able to handle all of that. And, I still didn't feel much like talking, but she had said to me, don't worry. Someday somebody's going to say something in a meeting and your hand's going to go up like there's a string on it, because you will identify with it. And it's going to be the thing that gets you started. And that's exactly what happened. I was at a meeting one night and this guy named Philadelphia Frank was talking, and he said, did you ever drink at anybody? And I went, oh crap. Yeah, I used to drink at everybody. And then my hand went up, and that was the beginning of it. And now you can't shut me up. I talk all the time. because I know what I am, I know who I am, and I know where I belong. You know, I hear people sometimes, and even me, I would, things would occur in my life, or I'd have an opportunity for something, and I'd say, well, what if this goes wrong? Or what if that happens? Or, oh, what, wait. And I heard a man in AA say, yeah, but what if it's amazing? All I have to do is find a different way to think about the things I'm afraid of, and I can do them. You know, today, whenever something comes up and I get a little anxious about it, I think, wait a minute, what if it's amazing? And it is. My life is amazing today. I cannot tell you how happy I am. I have friends like Karen and Scott. And, you know, I moved here. I moved to California because my son moved to California in 2000. He was married to his first wife for 10 years. After they got married, she said she wasn't going to have children. He was devastated. They finally get divorced, and he married a California girl, and they now have three kids. They're 9, 7, and 5. And when the little one was born, I used to come out and visit all the time. I'd fly out a couple of times a year to visit. And when the oldest one was 4, you know, he thought I lived at the airport because they picked me up at the airport, they dropped me off at the airport. And he started crying when his dad was going to drive me back to the airport. And he said, "I don't want you to go home, Meme. I want you to stay here. You can sleep in my bed." And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that as much as my whole life, in fact, on my mother's side of the family, we go back to Massachusetts to the 1630s. I am a Yankee through and through. But I knew my place was to be with my son and my grandkids, and to be here to help out with the kids, because he lost a lot of me when I was drinking and he was a kid. There was so much of the promises that I made to him that I never followed through on. And today I can do that. You know, I will tell you this, that there was a time when I was drinking that my son called me the C word. And today my son trusts me with his 3 most precious, precious people in the world. And so I came out here. I sold my home in Sandown, New Hampshire. I sold my home, but I sold it just before COVID happened, and I wasn't able to come out. I had to get a little apartment for a year and a half. So I came out as a snowbird for 1 year because I had to try the AA here first. I had to find out how good the AA was before I could decide to live here. And the AA was spectacular. And the people here, you know, in New England, it takes a while to get to know people. But once you do, we're loyal forever. We love you forever and ever, and we never forget you. But in California, I have made friends walking into a grocery store in the parking lot. People just start talking to you. It's incredible. And of course, the weather's pretty nice. Right now, we're worried a little bit about some fires, but I have to say, Cal Fire and North County San Diego Fire Department has done a great job where I live in knocking everything down pretty fast. Um, so I went home after that first winter, and I got rid of everything I owned, um, sold what I could, gave away everything else, and I came back because of that little boy and his brother and sister who now are there and who want me to be there. And you know, it's funny talking about surrender the other day. You know, I had to surrender to this program. I had to surrender to my alcoholism and realize that something had to be done about it. And surrender has a really bad time of it as a word, you know, kind of like humility. A lot of people don't like that word either. But, you know, I came out here and I heard 2 different explanations about surrender. One is surrender isn't giving up, surrender is refusing to give up. And I like that. The other thing I heard was surrender is going over to the winning side. And I have certainly done that when I surrendered to AA. I, I think for some people, you know, if there's anyone on tonight who's new or coming back and you're not sure if you're an alcoholic, I'd like to give you some advice that I heard when I was brand new. This man named Don Carroll used to always say, if you're not sure if you're an alcoholic, go home and ask your family. They're dying to tell you. And I think you'll get a good answer. I think you'll get a good answer from them. Um, I'm pretty active here. I'm retired now, so I can go to all the meetings I want. I go to 3 noontime meetings, and with 4 people, and there's just out of 4 of the people that are there, there's over 200 years of sobriety. People with 50 years of sobriety are pretty common around here. My 35 years is a mere pittance compared to most, but there's a guy here who used to run what they called a goat barn meeting. It was a wonderful outdoor meeting where we had 3 fire pits and went out all year round, and even in the winter it was great. And whenever anybody celebrated birthdays, they're called out here. Whenever you celebrate a birthday, if you get 35 years, and Paul would say, "Well, I heard 36 is a bitch," so you better just keep coming. And that business of asking your family, you know, we get so much more. And there was a man that came in the program a couple of years ago, and his whole family, nobody was talking to him at all. And he kept asking me, "What can I do? What can I do to get my son back? My son won't talk to me. My son won't talk to me. I want to see my grandkids. I want to see my grandkids." And I said, "I can only tell you what they told me. Time. It takes time. This I must earn. How many times did you say I'm sorry? You drank for 60 years. How many times did you say I'm going to quit and you picked it up again? You've got to let them finally see the reality of who you are now. And that's going to take a little while." So he got his 2 years. And a month ago, his son called him and said, "Dad, I'd like to meet with you and have a talk." And he's willing to let him come back into his life. But, the things that are the most important to us in life are other people. They are for me. And a power greater than myself. I skipped over that because I didn't know if there was a God. I was raised in a family that was dead set against organized religion. And I, as a youngster and as a young adult, all the years, even when I drank, I would go to different churches just to try them out and to see if I could find something that made sense to me. Because something told me that was one of the reasons why I felt I didn't belong. I remember in school, the kids would go to CCD after class, after school or whatever, and I never was a part of that. And I read the Bible. I remember I asked my mother to buy me a Bible, and she told me all the reasons why the Bible wasn't, blah, blah, blah. And I won't get into that. But I read it all by myself, scared the jeepers out of myself when I got to Revelations, I'll tell you that. But, you know, I've been able to find something that works for me. A couple of years ago, well, a year ago, I went to the San Diego International Convention here, and it was a huge roundup. And one of the panels they had was called "We Agnostics," and Atheists. And I wanted to go in to hear what they had to say. And the people on that panel all had between 40 and 55 years of sobriety. So yeah, it works, even if you don't have a higher power. And they use just what it says in the book: good orderly direction, or a group of drunks. Mine is a little bit more than that. Mine is my creator, it's source, it's an infinite intelligence, and it works for me. I talk to that higher power every morning. I ask that power greater than myself to keep me away from a drink of alcohol for today. I turn my will and my life over. I ask that my defects of character be removed as he would have it on the day that I ask. And I ask that if it's his will, he helps, still suffering alcoholics. And every night when I go to bed, I say thank you. And it's been working pretty well. There are times when I can feel that presence. I can really feel that presence. We've got a lot of newcomers that come to these meetings. And my home group here, I will tell you, my home group here is the 1, 2, 3 beginners meeting. We meet Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock. And I bake for the meeting, and we always have donuts and all this other stuff. But it's a great meeting, and a bunch of us all go out for breakfast afterwards. It's good old-fashioned AA. The fellowship is alive and well. And it's alive and well when I choose to participate. I can do that thing that other people do. I see them come in and sit in denial aisle, in the back instead of up front. And this meeting has 8 huge long tables set in a big rectangle. And we average about 40 people in the morning. And a new man came in, and he was sitting off by himself. He just grabbed a chair. So I just went up to him and I said, "Hi, my name's Donna." And he said his name was Bob and he was new. And I said, "Why don't you come and sit at the table with us? We'd love to have you join us." He said, "Well, I didn't see an empty chair." So I said, "Right over here." So we got him a chair. We always make room, for somebody. And you know what? That man felt comfortable enough to share that morning. Had 8 days of sobriety. And man, that kind of stuff warms my heart. It really does. I never felt that um, I deserved to get sober. I thought all the things that I had done in my life um, wouldn't afford me that grace. Our friend Scott always says, "Sober by the grace and mercy of a God that believed in." Well, I say, because I steal it from him, but I'm sober through the grace and mercy of a God that believed in me before I believed in him. And Scott always explained grace is getting what you don't deserve, and mercy is not getting what you do. I'm grateful I didn't get what I deserved back then. I'm grateful I've gotten this chance of sobriety. Um, I love coincidences in AA because coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. You know, and that first meeting that my sponsor wanted me to meet her at, that step and tradition meeting, used to be a man there named Lyle, and everybody used to make fun of him. They said he spoke in bumper stickers, but when you're new and your brain is mush and it's still filled with alcohol, bumper stickers are good. I can remember those. And I remember him saying, "Look, there's a lot to remember here. We're reading steps, we're reading traditions. There's a lot. It's going to take a while, but don't worry about it. The only thing you have to remember is that you're an alcoholic. Don't ever forget it. Always ask yourself in the morning, am I really an alcoholic? Because if the answer is I'm not sure, I'm going to drink again." And that's a given. That's a given. Every morning before I say anything else, I remember aloud by asking myself, am I really an alcoholic? And, that feeling of not deserving what I got stayed with me for quite a while until one day it dawned on me. I'm not here to earn God's love. I'm here to spend it. That's my job here. I'm supposed to pass this on to the next person. I go to a lot of meetings. And yes, it's about the steps. Yes, it's about the traditions. Yes, I have to work the steps in my life on a daily basis. Where I got sober, if you walked into a meeting and someone said, "How you doing?" and you said, "Great," they go, "Oh, good. What step are you on?" If you said life was bad, something horrible was happening, they say, "What step are you on?" Um, you know, I think once we get the steps under our belt and we've gone through them, we don't drink, we ask for help, we clean house, we help others, we do the things that we were meant to do, that Dr. Bob talked about. um, our job is to pass it on, and the only way I can pass it on is to know what the heck I'm talking about and remember what is important. And what's important is listening to a newcomer every day, how scared they are, reminding myself what it was like for me when I was new. And I just have to say that I have a life second to none today. you know, I love it. I love the people in AA, and I'm grateful for having had this opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope, because it's how I know I won't pick up a drink when I hang up on this Zoom call today. And tomorrow I'm going to do it all over again, but not for 45 minutes. Thank you all so much for letting me share.